Hello, fifth and sixth graders. Welcome to our next English video. It's dealing with modifiers. And this week we're covering Unit 6, and this will be week number 1. Now, modifiers we've been actually talking about, I'd say, the last number of weeks. And so I don't necessarily, most of the stuff we're going to talk about today is not anything new. It's actually a lot of review. The difference being is we're going to combine it all together now. The last few lessons that we learned. There is one component at the end that is a little bit newer, but for the most part, everything should be a review. It's just now we're putting it all together. So when we take a look at modifiers, let's define what modifiers are. Adjectives, adverbs, and prepositional phrases. These are all examples of modifiers. And what exactly is a modifier? It's a word or maybe groups of words that tell more about something, or maybe they modify other words in the sentence. So what that means is they would enhance the word a little bit, to give the word a little bit more detail. How many are we talking about? What color? When did something happen? Where did something happen? These would be examples of modifiers. And the three modifiers that we've been studying up until this point are adjectives, adverbs, and prepositional phrases. I'd like to take just a moment and just review those couple of items so that we have those fresh in our mind as we're going through this unit. The first one is adjectives. In case you forgot, adjectives are those words that modify or describe nouns and pronouns. So if you remember back a couple weeks ago when we did our lesson, adjectives would talk about, like, for example, how many are we talking about? Or which one? You know, those types of words that we're talking about, like a green marker or 14 pretzels. You know, these would be examples, or something like a big building. These are all examples of adjectives because they modify nouns. Then we take a look at what we did last time, which is adverbs. And we said that adverbs, most of the adverbs are going to modify verbs. They tell us how, when, and where. But we also do know that adverbs can also modify other adjectives. If you remember from our lesson from last week, if we had, like, let's say big, it's a big car, you might say that's a really big car. The word really is modifying big, which is an adjective. Or in some cases, adverbs can also modify other adverbs. So this is what we talked about last week. Adverbs modifying verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Prepositional phrases are going to be words that consist of more than one word, and both the prepositional phrases can actually can be used as an adjective, or it could be used as an adverb in the sentence. And that's what we're going to talk about specifically with this lesson. When you have a prepositional phrase, those are words that start with the words like the word in and under, over, at. You know, there's a ton of prepositions, and those are part of a prepositional phrase. So here's going to be a couple of examples of when a prepositional phrase is used either as an adjective or it's being used as an adverb. For example, here's my sentence. The windmills on the hill were huge. The sentence is basically the windmills were huge. The words on the hill, this is my prepositional phrase because it starts with a preposition, which is on, and it goes all the way until you get to the noun, hill. On the hill is the prepositional phrase. Now, what exactly is on the hill? Is huge on the hill? No, that doesn't sound right. Or are the windmills on the hill? Yeah, the windmills are on the hill. So in this case, the words on the hill it's a prepositional phrase, and it's being used as an adjective because it's describing the windmills. Okay, so if you have a prepositional phrase that's describing a noun, which windmills are nouns, then it'd be used as an adjective. Here's another sentence. The horse galloped up the hill. Now, in my sentence is basically the horse galloped. Now, what is up the hill is my prepositional phrase. What's going on with the word up the hill? Is the horse up the hill, or is it galloping up the hill? Well, hopefully you realize that in this particular sentence, the words up the hill is telling us where they galloped. So the words up the hill in this sentence is actually modifying the verb. And since this prepositional phrase is modifying the verb, it's being used as an adverb. So here are a couple of examples of prepositional phrases. One of them being used as an adjective because it's describing a noun. One of them being used as an adverb because it's modifying the verb. Now let's delve a little bit closer into that, where the prepositions are going to be found in the sentence. To avoid any type of confusion, what we want to do is we want to put those modifiers as close to the words that they modify as we can. We want to put them as close as possible to the words that they modify, because if we don't do that, then the sentence kind of changes its meaning. Adjective phrases, adjective prepositional phrases, usually, most of the time, are going to come right after the word that they modify, or they usually come right after the noun that they modify. For example, the man in the yellow hat gave George a treat. The prepositional phrase in this sentence is in the yellow hat. Now, what exactly is in the yellow hat? Is George in the yellow hat? No. Is the treat in the yellow hat? No. The man is in the yellow hat. And so since the words in the yellow hat is a prepositional phrase, it's describing this noun right here. So when it says adjective phrases usually come right after the words that they modify, you notice the word man, here's the adjective, here's the noun, the adjective phrase comes right after it. Okay. Now with adverb phrases are a little bit different. They might appear right after the verb, but sometimes they actually can be moved and actually put at the beginning of the sentence. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. The young girl drove behind the bus. So here I have a sentence, the young girl drove, and my prepositional phrase is behind the bus. This is the prepositional phrase. Now, what is behind the bus? Is the young girl behind the bus, or did they drive behind the bus? Well, in this sentence, we see that the prepositional phrase behind the bus is describing the verb. Where did they drive? They drove behind the bus. So this prepositional phrase is right after the verb. So when up here, when it said adverb phrases may appear right after the verb, this would be an example of it. Here's how you also know that it could be an adverb phrase. It might also be at the beginning of the sentence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this exact same sentence and I'm going to move the prepositional phrase out in front. Here's my sentence now. Behind the bus, the young girl drove. Notice the prepositional phrase behind the bus, still modifying the word drove, okay? Because it starts the sentence. So when I say adverb phrases, they might appear right after the verb, which happened right here, right after the word drove. Sometimes they might be found at the beginning of the sentence, behind the bus. And a lot of times you'll see a comma right after it too. That's kind of a giveaway. Hey, this might be a prepositional phrase. And since there's no nouns out in front, that probably tells you then it's modifying the verb, okay? The meaning of sentences, though, can become very unclear if that modifier is not in the right place. Let me give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about here. We read in class about a knight who battles giants. So in this sentence, my prepositional phrase is a really small one, in class. There's my preposition in this class, in class. What's going on with in class? In class is actually modifying where did we read? Where did we read? We read in class. So in this sentence here, this prepositional phrase in class is being used as an adverb phrase because it's modifying the word read. Now, what would happen, let's say, for example, if I were to move this in class and I were to move it later on in the sentence? I want you to look to see how the sentence now changes. We read about a knight who battles giants in class. In the first sentence, you can tell that we are reading something in class about this particular battle. Now the sentence has a different meaning. read about knights who battled giants in class. Now it sounds like we're reading a story about a knight who battles a giant while they're in the middle of a classroom. So do you see how moving the words in class changes the thought of how the sentence is being used? It totally changes what's going on. The first one is we're reading class. The second one is we're reading about giants that are in class. So it changes that sentence. Here's another example. The girl in the dress loves stories about Mr. Johnson. Now, in this sentence, in a dress is modifying the word girl. It's an adjective. So it's describing the girl. So in this sentence here, we have the girl in the dress. The girl is the one that's in the dress, and she loves stories about Mr. Johnson. What would happen if we move the words in the dress around in the sentence? It totally changes this sentence altogether. The girl loves stories about Mr. Johnson in a dress. Notice the first sentence, the girl is the one who's in the dress, and she loves stories about Mr. Johnson. In the second sentence, the girl now loves stories about Mr. Johnson, who is in a dress. So do we see how moving that prepositional phrase to a different spot in the sentence makes the sentence unclear? What's going on? We don't know. So it changes the whole idea. So when it comes to prepositional phrases, you want to keep them as close as you can to the words that they modify, because if you don't, it changes the meaning of the sentence. The one new aspect about today's lesson is the word only. The position of the word only in a sentence can affect the sentence's entire meaning. So whenever you have the word only in a sentence, you want to put the word only directly in front of the word that it modifies. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Only he saw giants. Oops, let's go back here. I don't want to get down there. Only he saw giants. In this sentence, the word only is describing he, which means nobody else saw the giants except for he. That's what this sentence is saying. Only he and no one else. Okay? The next sentence is he only saw giants. Now, it's the exact same words, but if you look at this, now this meaning means he didn't do anything else except see the giants. That's it. So in this first sentence, nobody else saw the giants except for him. And in this sentence, the only thing that he did was see the giants. Or if we move it even a little farther, he saw only giants, which means he didn't see anything else except giants. Do you see how changing the word only in the sentence changes the meaning of the sentence? Even though I use the exact same words all three times, it changes the meaning of the sentence. So if you're only talking about one person doing something, put the word only in front of the person or the pronoun. If you want to talk about doing nothing else except for seeing, then you'd put the word only in front of the word saw. If you want to say that he saw nothing else, the only thing that you saw was giants or whatever it is, then you put the word only in front of the word giants. All right, let's do a couple of examples. And this is going to be very similar to what is going to be on your sheet for today. They're going to say, write down adverb, adjective, or prepositional phrase to identify each underlined modifier. If you do write down prepositional phrase, they also want you to write adjective or adverb to tell how is that prepositional phrase being used. Okay, now let me give you a little hint here. If you notice that only one word is underlined, that probably means it's either an adverb or an adjective. If you see more than one word underlined at 5 o'clock in the doctor's office, that is a huge indicator that that's a prepositional phrase, and now you have to identify that as an adjective or an adverb. So let's take a look at the first one. Sarah drew funny pictures of the clown. The word funny. Now, what is the word funny doing? Is the funny talking about draw? Or is the word funny talking about the pictures? And remember, we said that we want to try to put that prepositional phrase as close to the word as possible. What's funny in this situation is the pictures. So the word funny is describing pictures. And pictures is a noun. That means that the word funny is an adjective. Next one, Mary quietly read her book in the corner. What is it that she is doing quietly? Is Mary quietly, or is how she read quietly? The word quietly is describing how she read. The word read is a verb. So a word that describes or modifies a verb, that's going to be an adverb. My next sentence, at 5 o'clock, Emily cooked a delicious pie. Emily, at 5 o'clock, what is it at 5 o'clock? Is Emily at 5 o'clock? Or is that when it was cooked, was that at 5 o'clock? It was when it was cooked. So this is an example of a prepositional phrase. And this prepositional phrase is telling when it was cooked. So this would be an example of a prepositional phrase that is modifying the verb. So we would write prepositional phrase and it's being used as a verb. Jeff played the man in the doctor's outfit. In the doctor's outfit is the prepositional phrase. Now, is it played in the doctor's outfit, or was the man in the doctor's outfit? The man was in the doctor's outfit. And this prepositional phrase is modifying this noun, which means that this would be an example of a prepositional phrase that modifies a noun. So we would write prepositional phrase, describe an adjective. Here's a couple more examples. Each one of these sentences has a misplaced modifier, which means the modifier in the sentence is not in the right spot. So they're going to ask you to rewrite these sentences, and you're going to put the words or the phrases where it actually belongs. So let's read this out loud for me. Stephen waited and imagined about clowns in the waiting room. Now, if you read this sentence, you can tell that Stephen is obviously waiting for something, and Stephen is imagining that there are clowns in the waiting room. Do you think he's imagining about clowns being in a waiting room? Does that sound kind of silly? Seems kind of silly to me. I think in this sentence, the word in the waiting room is in the wrong spot, because I don't think he's imagining about clowns that are in the waiting room. But I think the word in the waiting room is actually describing where Stephen is waiting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this phrase, in the waiting room, and I'm going to move it right behind the word waited. And I'm going to rewrite the sentence to look like this. Stephen waited in the waiting room and imagined about clowns. Okay? You can tell how these two now have different ideas, because the first one is there's clowns in the waiting room. I don't think that's exactly what Stephen's waiting for. Or how about this? Mr. Mitchell only watched SportsCenter. He watched nothing else. Well, this sentence here doesn't make it sound like he watched nothing else. It makes it look like he only watched. So I think the word only is in the wrong spot, because if he didn't watch anything else, if the only thing he watched was SportsCenter, then the word only should not be in front of the word watched. The word only should be in front of the word SportsCenter. So I'm going to take this word only, and I'm going to move it to put it right in front of the word SportsCenter. And here's my sentence now. Mr. Mitchell watched only SportsCenter and nothing else. Okay. All right, that's all I have for today's lesson. If you have any questions on this particular lesson, please feel free to reach out to me. It can be a little confusing on some of these, so please do so. You can always go back and rewatch the video to look at some of the examples as well. But if you don't have any questions, we will see you next time with our next video.